Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Mistake Zone, your weekly dose of our lives and the mistakes within them. My name is Jaren Wade, and joining me, as always, is one of my very best friends in the whole wide world. Hey, Matt.
Yo.
How are you doing?
Yo, I'm doing good.
Matt, I keep saying it. The Mistake Zone is a gaming and anime adjacent podcast, and I know what everyone's thinking. Where is the anime? People are saying they hear the gaming. Our friends saying they hear the gaming, but Matt, no real anime adjacent discussions really going on. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I'll try to talk about the next season of Nagatoro. I'll try to say that there's anime in Fortnite, but Matt, it's just not the same as actual anime. So Matt, when we were talking about bringing back the Mistake Zone, I know you penciled in August 4th.
Yep.
The debut of Kakegurui Twin on Netflix. And Matt, we've said it before, Kakegurui has a special place in the Mistake Zone.
It does, Jaren.
So as we begin this episode, this new installment of the Mistake Zone, Matt, when I say Kakegurui, what comes to mind?
Good anime.
Matt,
Jaren.
Matt, after watching the first 3 episodes of Kakegurui Twin, I'm still on the fence, and I'm still unsure if Kakegurui is a good anime.
I don't know if Twin helped Kakegurui's case.
So Matt, Kakegurui Twin is the Mary spin-off of, the main Kakegurui series, and it is a prequel to the first 2 seasons that are, currently available on Netflix. The 2 seasons that follow our main protagonist, Yumiko. And Matt, how do you feel about prequels?
Jaren, I am generally, most of the time, not too much a fan of prequels.
Matt, I'll just say this. I hate prequels. I hate prequels. I actually hate episodes within mainline anime that really harken back to, they're more so the prologues or they give context to the current situation, just because when I'm invested in a current storyline, I don't want it stopped, and I don't want to have this refresher or have this glimpse of why the characters are the way they are. Honestly, I'm reading a few manga right now where they have kind of paused the action, paused the current story arc, just to kind of give us a look of, oh, how did the girls, first meet, or why are they like this and that? I honestly don't like it. I especially don't like prequels, just because here in Kakegurui Twin, we're introduced to a handful of characters that have I haven't actually seen in the mainline Kakegurui series. As I said, I've only watched the first 3 episodes of Twin, and that's the 3 episodes we'll be discussing in this episode of the Mistake Zone. And I'm not sure how that pans out in the next 3 episodes, but it's the fact that we're introduced to so many characters that don't even get mentioned or even hinted at within the mainline story. That's where it really gets to me, and that kind of breaks my immersion overall, just because with a prequel, I feel like I can't necessarily be invested in these characters because the payoff, to me at least, isn't usually there. When it happens, but for the most part, to me, after the first 3 episodes of Kakegurui, this is just giving context to Mary, to who she is in the mainline Kakegurui series. But at the same time, there's still a bit of disconnect there, and I think we'll kind of get into that when we share our final thoughts after we go through the first 3 episodes. But yeah, Matt, as a prequel, how does Kakegurui Twin, how did it resonate for you after at least the first 3 episodes?
After the first 3 episodes, this is still a Kakegurui-ass anime.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, Mary's character at the start of Twin feels a lot more like Mary's character at the end of or mid-end season 1. Yes. Which kind of threw me off because granted, I didn't rewatch the first episode of Kakegurui season 1, but Mary is mean and deliberately cheating in that first episode, isn't she?
And I think that's what really caught me off guard with watching through Twin, just because, as you said, the way that Mary is presented throughout at least the first three episodes, this is essentially the same character that I'm used to towards the end of season one of Kakegurui, and actually throughout her appearances in season two of the show as well, where I think uh, Mary as a character has grown not necessarily as Yumiko's sidekick, but she's kind of this anti-hero and like a really good foil to Yumiko as a whole. And I kind of do enjoy, from at least the first three episodes, we get to learn a lot about Mary's kind of just principles, her whole goal, and why she wants to be, why she wants to be the champion of the academy. This is something that I think really further establishes her character throughout season one and season two of Kakegurui. But at the same time, there's this disconnect, just because we know when we're first introduced to Mary in episode one, I believe episode one, she is this more sadist type character where she is actively cheating. She is overly aggressive. And honestly, that's not the Mary that we know. And it's kind of weird to me, just because I assume that the way Twin goes is we do see Mary at her breaking point to where she is. This is what I'm guessing, how she becomes the way she is in episode one of the original Kakegurui. But at the same time, the way she's presenting herself right now, if you were to tell me that this was kind of a continuation of S2 or Kakegurui XX, this is essentially the same Mary, and that's what's really throwing me off about it, just because
same.
We're sure this is her origin story, but unless something really drastic happens, and by the way episode 3 ends, I think that's where we're heading to, this doesn't line up to how the Mary we're introduced with. And I think this is kind of an issue that I have with like a lot of different prequels, where you're trying to set up this character and explain why they are the way they are in the main storyline, but at the same time, the Mary in the main storyline is such a different character who has her own ups and downs. But even then, you have these relationships that she's forming within Twin, but at the same time, I don't know, I feel like maybe this is just because I'm not done the whole series, but I don't really feel a payoff coming. I don't really feel a connection, just because, again, this is the issue I have with prequels, where it sort of gives context, but it doesn't actually feel like it's part of the main story. But yeah, Matt, just based on, I guess, your soft, spoiler-free impressions without going too deep, was Kakegurui as a whole, I know we're only talking about the first 3 episodes, but for Twin as a whole, was it something that scratched an itch for you for this series, or did it leave you actually just wanting S3 or Triple X of Kakegurui?
There were some like things that it scratched the itch for. Like, even if it's not I guess mainline Kakegurui, it still does go through the standard, I guess, Kakegurui cycle, I guess, of, hey, here's your game. Oh, main character appears to be losing game, but hey, here's the turn, here's the enemy's turn, and then here's like the reverse turn on like the enemy's turn. And like, I don't know, that's just like such for me always been admittedly it's a very like standard I guess like plot structure.
Right.
But it's always been like a fun one for me to watch, and it definitely scratches that itch for me. But like, as far as Twin as a whole goes, I don't know if this is like really a spoiler, but I thought that Twin was going to be a complete standalone story.
Right.
But what has released for Twin, like episodes 1 through 6, were actually just an arc.
Oh,
and
really?
that threw me off. Like, it's not like, oh, Mary from the start all the way to Mary to the start of season 1. It's actually like, seems like, oh, this could be its own kind of like mini series as well. Like, it may be another like, I don't know, 6 to 12 episodes even.
Oh, when you put it that way, I think, okay, that's something we should probably look into as well, just to see how they plan to continue the Twin arc or the Twin series. Is this a one-off, or is this something that will end up seeing more seasons? But At the same time, I think this is kind of the issue I had with the different Kakegurui spin-off mangas that I've read, which admittedly is only one. I finished the Madari manga spin-off, and again, it was the same issue that I have with Twin as a whole, where it is a prequel story, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily feel like it has that much stake towards it. Oddly enough, considering that this is a franchise based on gambling, I feel like from Twin and like the Madari spinoff that I read, there were no stakes there just because it doesn't actively route into Kakegurui, the main series as a whole. And again, I've only watched the first 3 episodes, but for the most part, I don't necessarily see how it interconnects into the mainline series, just because while we're seeing cameos and appearances by other characters that we've seen previously, at the same time, when you establish Mary and her own crew of gamblers, and then for you to be introduced to her in S1 and they don't exist, I don't know, Matt. That's really what's stopping me from fully being invested in it. But I know we're kind of talking around everything, Matt. So let's start off. Let's go through the first 3 episodes of Kakegurui Twin and see where we stand at the end of this. The first episode is a girl named Satomi, or Mary Satomi. The Netflix synopsis reads, lacking gambling skills, Suzura Hana Tamari finds herself at the bottom of the food chain until one day an old friend transfers to the academy. And Matt, I think this is what threw me off, but I was kind of half expecting it, where when Twin starts off, we're introduced to Suzura, and she seems to be not necessarily the protagonist of the series, but maybe she is, for all intents and purposes, Mary's sidekick. And this was kind of the same thing with the Madari manga spinoff, where Madari, she's not necessarily the central character, but in the spinoff itself, she was more so a co-protagonist, with it centered around this girl named Ayami. So at the same time, I feel like with Kakegurui as a whole, you need this straight man, or, the only sane person to actually balance all the craziness and obnoxiousness that really encapsulate what's Kakegurui is all about. So, Matt, we're introduced to Susura. How do you feel about her as a character from the first episode, or as the series as a, I guess, for the first 3 episodes?
I don't like her as a character. She's
okay.
Her design is very, I don't know. It's just, to me, blue Yumiko.
Yeah, for Susura, I don't know, Matt. Something's not hitting with me, just because I know Mary works as a character just because she's the straight man, to Yumiko. And for Mary to really work, she needs to be the one that's grounded. And in terms of her relationship with Susura, I don't really feel like she offers much to kind of elevate Mary as a character, other than the fact that, she needs, to me, Susura exists as someone Mary needs to take pity on, which is kind of this weird dynamic that we're used to, just because her as a foil to Yumiko is more so her trying to rein in Yumiko's craziness and at the same time still trying to look out for herself. And I'm not necessarily sure I feel Mary's like older sister instinct towards protecting Susura, but at the same time, I feel like she's designed in a way, her performance is given in such a way of, hey, please take pity on me. And she only really exists to make Mary have some risk, because without her, I don't think Mary really would be able to move forward. And I guess if that's her sole purpose, that's, she succeeds in that. But as a character, I don't know, she doesn't really do much for me. I guess that kind of changes when we get to episode 3. But yeah, to me, Susura doesn't really accomplish anything other than, hey, she needs to be the reason the plot moves forward for Mary to be able to grow. But that's just me.
And I also, actually, just going back to Suzuru real quick as a character, I don't like that they gave her almost like very, very similar of a vocal cadence as Yumiko.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Like, I think I think that's just like way too similar, and I feel like they should have just tried to divorce any characters from Yumiko as much as they could have.
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult just because Yumiko, to me, she leaves such a strong presence for this franchise as a whole. And of course, I've said it to death in the Mistake Zone before. Yumiko is both a blessing and kind of a detriment to the franchise as a whole, just because one, I really like her as a character, but two, she kind of makes the series in itself really boring. I think I've said it before, Matt. My biggest hope for Kakegurui as a whole is Yumiko becoming the antagonist, just because I feel like she's too strong. And likewise, I think Twin, to me, is a good palate cleanser, just because overall this solidifies that Mary isn't on Yumiko's level in terms of being a gambler, and I think in terms of being a, for lack of a better term, shonen type protagonist, where Mary doesn't seem overpowered. I know she is within that top tier of, gamblers within the academy, but at the same time, what I do appreciate is Twin really humbles her early on, and that's something that I feel like we never see with Yumiko. And I don't think we can see with Yumiko, one, just because stakes to Yumiko doesn't exist, and two, I think she's just too strong as a character to be able to be held down by something like that.
Yeah, I don't think that we're ever gonna see that for Yumiko in like anymore in Kakegurui, unless you do kind of like a dive back into her history and just like flashback for, I don't know, an episode or two.
And to me, that's really interesting how you can do something like that, because she's already portrayed as this whimsy, I don't care as long as I can get my gambling on. So to see a more human Yumiko, a more down to earth Yumiko, I wonder if that would just be odd, just because that's the character hasn't been set up to present that to me as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, Matt, we're introduced to the Academy's rules, the pet system. So this is kind of a really good introduction to what Kakegurui is as a whole, where it is, one, an obnoxious gambling spectacle, but two, it really does play on a class system, the rich, the poor, and how the winners and losers are treated really differently in this academy. But during Susura's introduction to the academy, how did you like the style change from, or tried and true Kakegurui style, to this more playful, I guess, cartoony feel to introduce everyone to the world?
That was a good style. I can't remember. I don't know if you know, Jaren, but that style is like very similar to a different anime. It wasn't like Pop Team Epic exactly, but there was something similar to it. I don't know if like I couldn't like put my finger on what the animation style reminded me of the most.
See, this is how I'm still baby's first anime. It reminds me of this girl character with, like, she has brown hair, small pigtails. She has goofy looking eyes and this goofy smile. I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about, but it really reminded me of that style. And during this introduction to the academy, I really did like some of the production choices that they have, because, Matt, if there's one thing I'm a sucker for, it's marker and graffiti overlays on top of your scene. And for this section to be finished, and it's essentially Susura's doodles on top of the character she's introducing, which is her, Kokoro, who is the school's former top gambler, and then Mary, who is the transfer student, honor student. And Matt, I think this introduction scene kind of also reminded me how many throwaway characters there are in Kakegurui, just because you have Kokoro being introduced as essentially this big bad, but she, at least for the first 3 episodes, she hasn't really come into play again. But I think overall, I really did like the introduction to Twin. I guess it really just reminds everyone about the rules of the academy. And
Hmm.
I really like the hard shift of, oh, here's Mary, here's Susura. They're on top of the world, and it hard cuts to a week later at the academy, and Mary has made no progress at all. And I know we get this kind of monologue where Mary really solidifies what her goal is in the campus or in the academy, and she wants to be champion. That's why she wanted to transfer there. But then she learns that even though she won 200K on the first day, that's chump change in the school. Matt, as we know, one of the things that has, come up in Kakegurui, and that this was honestly one of my biggest pet peeves towards the end of XX. Matt, the bet sums are just too outrageous. They're just so much.
Yeah.
And I know this was kind of a way to show how high the stakes can get at the academy, but to me, I thought this was like a good throwaway joke just to kind of see or signify how grounded Mary is currently in comparison to where her and Yumiko and like the whole gang is at by the end of XX, where they're literally throwing around hundreds of millions of yen at the blink of an eye. And here we're talking about how 200K means literally nothing. But yeah, Matt, the way this introduction structures it, I loved the phrase from Susura where she says, "And so begins Mary's story," or should I say our story. This really solidified me that this isn't necessarily Mary's story, but like Susura really does have this big of a part in it overall. But we know that Mary's goal is to capture one of the gamblers' dens, and she wants to get to one that's the easiest to take over just so she can become a financer, and this is how she'll get she'll start her journey to be the champion of the school. And Matt, we're taken to the OP. What did you think of the OP of Twin?
I was kind of disappointed by the OP for Twin. I thought it wasn't
Really?
fantastical enough for Kakegurui.
See, for me, Matt, I actually enjoyed how more reserved the OP was, just because I agree. It wasn't outrageous. It wasn't in your face, but I feel like it really fits Mary, or at least my perception of Mary, where she's more, low key. It's pretty basic as opposed to what we're kind of used to seeing it from Kakegurui and from XX, where it's really in your face. It matches the pace of Yumiko. It really creates a spectacle for you to be invested. Yet when we get Mary's OP, there's not a lot of detail. It's really minimalistic, especially compared to everything, which I thought was really fitting for the Mary character. But at the same time, when you had so many bangers being used for OPs, I couldn't be helped but a little disappointed, but I understood where it was coming from. But Matt, we're taken to the gambler's library room number 2, the gambling den that Mary wants to take over, and we're introduced to the literary club president. Matt, I still can't speak, but we're introduced to Yukimi, and then we're also introduced to a student council member, chair of the public morals committee, Sachiko, and her pet Mercura. Essentially, the literary club's permission to use library prep room number 2 has been revoked. Yukimi's been unable to pay the fees, and Matt, we get our first real gamble of the show.
Yes.
It's Mary versus Yukimi for the gambling den. 1 million yen buy-in. And essentially, Mary pays what she has. So Chico will pay the rest. If Mary loses, she owns 800K to her. And again, Susura says, "Oh, we shouldn't do this." But there's one quote that I really like from Mary when she replies to Susura saying that the risk is too high. This is what separates winners and losers. And I feel like this quote in particular really, I'll bring this up again by episode 3, but I feel like this really gives me a good look at Mary as a character and kind of her mindset. But Matt, what did you think of the game 3-hit dice?
Okay, Jaren, they explained the logic of what a good choice is for 3-hit dice.
Yeah.
And man, I had to...
So I guess before we get to it, let's explain the rules. It's essentially dealer rolls while the players guess the rolls. 1, 2, and 3 are considered down. 4, 5, and 6 are considered up. You'll try to guess 3 consecutive rolls of the dice. Whoever's combination appears first wins. The player writes down their guesses and gives it to the dealer, and whoever's sequence appears first wins. But yeah, sorry, Matt, for cutting you off. What did you think of 3 hit dice?
I had to rewatch their explanation of the logic of picking a good, what do you call it? A good guess
Sequence.
Like 2 or 3 times to really like understand what was going on. And I still don't think that I have like a really good grasp of what the logic is.
I think as a game, I really like how simple and grounded it was. Again, Matt, in comparison to what we were seeing by the end of XX, I think this game was really needed just because it kind of sets up the difference in mindset between Susura and Mary as a whole. Because with Susura, her analysis, she says, oh, whatever you write down has a 1 in 8 chances of winning. But this is countered by Mary saying that's a big mistake. If rolled indefinitely, then there's a probability that any combination would be the same. But however, you're guessing which combination comes first, not, what the probability of a combination comes. And then again, this is where the kind of the classic Kakegurui tomfoolery comes in, where it's not necessarily the game you're coming here. You're kind of coming for not only the mind games, but really the backwards ass explanations of how they're trying to win in this situation.
Yeah, that's actually what kind of threw me off about this one. Because usually I'm also trying to guess what the backwards like kind of cheat logic that either character is gonna use.
Yeah.
And it actually caught me off guard a little bit that the cheat was like specifically coming from the dealer in this game.
Yeah. But yeah, I like how this game really, as I said before, reinforces that Mary is in this elite tier of gamblers just because she has it within herself to kind of analyze everything at play and try to make an unfavorable situation something that favors her. So I think the twist, quote unquote, is her losing the first round but demanding to play a second round, which Sachiko agrees. And this is kind of where we see what factors are at play. Makura says that, she wants Mary to lose, so she's stacking the game in her favor. And as a result, this is something what Mary notices. Mary's thermos comes into play. She knocks it down in order to wet her guest card to make sure that, if one situation happens in the next, her card changes based on, what was it, her lipstick concealer?
Yeah, something like that.
Being washed off or not. So yeah, I think this is what there's one production thing I really enjoyed in the scene. It's when Makura was explaining how the cheat was working, in that basically she kind of reiterates that you're more likely to get this sequence other than like the rest of them. And when Mary explains it, the sequence itself is just in a straight line. But when Makura explains it, I really liked how it was kind of this spiral, just going into the center of the screen to really show how distorted her view of the game was in comparison to Mary, who was kind of playing it, straight, as she is normally the straight woman in this. But yeah, Mary is able to have her clutch win by tampering in her favor. And it's revealed that Sachika didn't really care about the outcome of the game. She just wanted to see what Mary's deal was, and because ultimately Sachiko wants to see Mary cry. That's her whole goal here. At the end of the episode, Mary and Susura become friends. Mary wants her to lose her pet status because she can't, stand seeing her friend be called that. And she reaffirms that we're going to come up on top. No one's going to look down on us. We finally get Mary's goal for at least her purpose at the academy, which is something that I appreciated just because this was really her, like an extension of where she's at currently in XX and what she really wants to do to the academy. I really do like it does keep her goal of becoming the champion for her own means. But again, I feel like where she's at in XX is slightly different to her while it's the same goal, the reasoning behind it is slightly different. But I really did like how, to me, this was the Mary of season two, and it really establishes her character, her bond with Susura, and really her. It shows her distaste for the pet system as a whole. But overall, episode one of Twin is Kakegurui as Kakegurui to me, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it follows, as you said, the same formula of game is stacked against the protagonist. In the last second, they turn the odds in their favor based on their previous experience and analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's odd because Mary, for the most part, seems like her, as I said before, current iteration of season two. And as we said before, when we're first introduced to Mary, she's more arrogant. She's this antagonist to Yumiko. But as I said before, Matt, I asked you what makes a good, straight man character, because you need it for Kakegurui. But how do you like the dynamic between Mary and Susura versus the dynamic between Yumiko and Mary slash Ryota?
I think I don't really like the one between Mary and Susura as much as Mary Yumiko. That might just be me like Yumiko fanboying, but like I said, like maybe it's just that right now Susura is a bit too weak of a character compared to, I guess, Mary, who is like
Right.
very established as a character. So it feels a little bit or like I not even a little bit, like very imbalanced
Yes.
in terms of what I could expect from either of them.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the issue. The dynamic between Mary and Yumiko, to me at least, feels like they're sort of equals.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say that Mary is exactly on Yumiko's par, but at least we know that Mary can hold her own.
Mhm.
As I said before, Susura has been designed just to be this pet, this weakling, the character that Mary's supposed to dote over. And I don't know, Matt. To me, Susura seems more so as a plot device than actually a character for her own character, which kind of bums me out.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think, well, before I get ahead of myself, that was episode one, Matt. Was it did it leave a strong impression on you?
Jaren, you know what left a strong impression on me in episode one is the ending. Jaren, the ending for Twin is so good.
I love the ED. I think, Matt, I know we said that the OP was, really minimalist. It was kind of lacking compared to what we're used to from Kakegurui as a whole. But I really do like the outrageous nature. This is the spectacle that we're all expecting. And Matt, I feel like the OPs for Kakegurui, I think they're obnoxious. They're really flamboyant. They really speak to Yumiko's character. But the ED to Twin, Matt, to me, the ED is just friendship incarnate.
Dude, the
like,
ED is so good. It's a music video, basically.
I love it. It really kind of establishes that, or gives the impression that, Mary, Susura, and I guess Yukimi, again, one of my issues with just watching any ED or OP before the end of a series, you kind of get the relationships kind of spoiled or established. But I really do like how fun it was. It does give a different vibe. And to me, I think it really kind of highlights what Mary is currently fighting for, at least in Twin. And again, it really adds to the disconnect of where she's at in in S1 and XX. But yeah, overall, I really did like episode one of Twin, but at the same time, it's a more grounded Kakegurui, which I really liked. But again, it's a prequel. I'm left kind of confused where Mary goes from here, but I think it's something that I would otherwise make me want to keep watching if I wasn't already going to keep watching. This brings us to episode 2 of Kakegurui Twin, A Targeted Girl. Netflix says, student council member Sakura Maharutaki. Matt, I'm really bad with names. Anyway, she faces off against a gamble-crazed, unruly student. Mary's scheme backfires when an unexpected guest shows up. Matt? Episode 2 opens up and we see a bunch of familiar faces.
Yeah.
Again, I might hate prequels, Matt, but I really do like to see, our family, Matt,
Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
crazed gambling family.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where it opens up with a shot of the student council of the academy, and for the most part, it's more or less the same of who we're used to. Of course, there are, I think, at least two or three characters that aren't in the current rendition of the student council. But Matt,
Yeah.
we're seeing them again after so many months, so many years. How do you? What did you think when you first saw the student council return?
Honestly, my first thought for seeing the student council wasn't even about the, I guess, student council that we already know.
Yeah.
I was looking at all the new people, and I was thinking, oh, how are you going to like die off before the main series starts?
But yeah, we see some familiar faces, and the reason that they're all together is they need to address a problem student. Matt, it's
Mm-hmm.
my girl, Madari, and she has
Mm-hmm.
two eyes, Matt, eye patch
Oh
free,
man.
which tells
Jared.
me this takes place before the spin-off manga of hers as well.
Oh, wait, when does the spin-off manga for Ikishima take place?
For her, it takes place when she's actually part of the student council committee, but before Yumiko.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, maybe she'll get the next spin-off then. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can see a spin-off for her as well, just because she seems like, well, she got a manga spin-off as well, and I think
Mm-hmm.
she's one of the more interesting characters overall. And just because I really like how she was presented in episode 2, but I'm getting ahead of myself again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Essentially, they need to deal with the problem girl, who is essentially the gambling den destroyer. She owns 7 of them. I think that she owns 7 of the gambling dens, but 5 of them report officially to the student council. And she hasn't been paying the operation fees.
Mm-hmm.
President tells Sayaka that she'll leave it to her. Matt, it was nice seeing Sayaka again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But before we get to the Madari kind of scene, we get reintroduced to Mary and Susura. We see razor blades in Susura's shoes, Matt. I don't know
man,
about you, but
Jared.
I winced when I saw that.
Oh, dude, Jared, razor blades, and like anything to do with like I don't know, fingernails or toenails.
Yeah.
They always give me the same kind of like creep chills.
Yeah. I don't know. When I saw that, again, it's playing into the fact that Susura is this unfortunate character, someone for Mary to look over. We can see Mary's reaction change when she sees the razor blades.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess this just reaffirms to Mary what she has to do. They go to their gambling den, which is library room number 2, and
Mhm.
Yukimi's there cleaning it up. She wants to keep using it as a club, says that it won't interfere with the gambling, and Susura signs off on it as well because she knows having your own space taken away must be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt, I
Mhm.
think this is where we establish what Mary's goal is. She plans to donate 1 million yen for the special donation rule to reverse pet status, meaning
Mhm.
that they need 1.7 million yen in all to kind of accomplish their goals, pay off their current debts, get Susura out of the pet status, and begin their journey to being the champion of the school.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
before that, we get introduced to Madari's crew. I have a note here, Matt. It says Madari's crew in parentheses. Hey, you're from the manga. So it's nice to see Madari's friends, who are nameless in here, plus the manga, I believe. But it's good to see them appear in the anime as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're introduced to Sakura, who is the current beautification council chief. And Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I said let's go just because we know that Madari in the anime and in the manga, she is the current beautification council chief.
Mhm.
So I'm really curious to see how the titles end up changing to her.
Yeah.
We learned that Madari owes the student council 5 million yen for her 5 dens, and that the beautification council has the right to arrest students. Matt, we get our first gamble of the show. Madari versus Sakura in a I like the confidence from Madari here when she says, let's gamble with your favorite game. If you win, I'll pay up. If you lose, you leave. How about it? I think the way Madari has been presented in her segment of this episode really kind of reaffirms her character, how outrageous she is. But Matt, I really like how she was presented here.
Yeah.
But before we talk about that, let's get to the game. Really simple game. Roll the dice. Sakura says this is a make it or break it game. Guess what? Whether the dice is even or odd. It's a simple even odd game. Madari rolls. Sakura is the one to guess, and she ultimately wins. Madari ends up paying out the $5 million and then offers to do a redo with $30 million instead. Madari asks, hey, why did you choose even? Sakura says, you already know why. Matt, again, we have a really simple gamble, but overall, what did you think of Roll the Dice?
I loved how this whole gamble like played out.
Yeah.
I guess Midari kind of taunting Sakura and Sakura just giving her whole explanation, and then Sakura leaving, and then it just going back to Midari and her just going over, yeah, no, I wasn't cheating. This was a legitimate just 50-50 gamble.
Which is totally within Madari's character, where I love Madari as a character because she, in her mind, she is the, disillusioned hero. She's the disillusioned protagonist where she sees herself as an equal to Yumiko. But yet, sort of like Mary, where, of course, sort of like Mary, where they're both these high tier gambling characters. There's something there that separates them from Yumiko. But in Madari's mind, we kind of see where she believes, they're kind of the same. But yeah, I love this scene. I love how it really took on the psychological aspect of what Kakegurui is, where it is all mind games. Sakura says, I took advantage of their cheat. They tried to lure me in because all the different games within the club room, they all took time. That means we had to go to either cards or the dice, and either one of them they could have cheated at. But to me, I was able to hold the dice. And then that's the reason why Sakura doesn't take up the $30 million rematch, when in reality it is Madari revealing, hey, I was doing this fair and square. I just love the rush of gambling. So I think, to me, this was a really good showing of Madari. I can definitely see Matt, the Madari here reminded me a lot of the Madari from the spin-off manga, just because I feel like her showing in season 1 and in XX, it's a lot more deranged and disillusioned, where at least in the manga, she's a bit more level-headed. As I said before, the manga more so follows this girl, Ayami, as she, decides if she wants to join the student council beautification committee. And it's really Madari as a character trying to push her out of her shell and have Ayami realize, hey, you're also a pervert gambler too. You need to come out of, stop being self-reserved. So to me, this Madari really fits in that, where she just wants to gamble. And while that's still true in season 1 in XX, I feel like it is more disillusioned. It is much more outrageous, but that really makes any interaction with her and Yumiko really more entertaining to me. But yeah, Matt, we finally get to the literary club, which is, Matt, come on, Maid Cafe.
Yep.
And then we get Mary's game. Matt, what did you think of Mary's 3-dice game?
This is, I think, the first game in Kakegurui where I understood the trick when they explained the game from the start.
Right. Matt, can you break down Mary's game for all our friends listening?
All right. So for Mary's game, it's basically a dice rolling game. The opponent will roll 1 dice, and Mary's team, I guess, will roll the other dice. The dice themselves are 6-sided dice, but they're not standard 6-sided dice. One dice has the numbers 1, 5, 9.
White dice.
Yes. The other dice has, I think the red dice is 2, 6, 7.
Yep.
And then the black dice is 3, 4, 8.
Yes.
And basically it's a best of 3. Whoever rolls the highest number 3 times, or like in the 3 matches, wins. it's a very, I guess, simple game to like get a grasp on.
And I really like the caveat that they added that, as you said, Matt, it's essentially a best of three because all the competitors or all the gamblers, there's a 3 times a day limit. And when, Susura asks, oh, why is there a limit? We can, get our earnings faster this way. I love how Mary says it's like a magic trick. You don't show it off over and over again. That means the game changes every week. They're able to make 300K on the first day. But yeah, I really like the scene just because, to me, Matt, it kind of builds off this self-confidence for not only not only Mary, but it also gives Yukimi and Susura this false sense of not only confidence, but this blind trust in Mary in itself. And I don't know, overall, I really liked the presentation. As you said, the game was simple. And I think for the first 2 episodes, I really did appreciate how simple all the different gambles were, all the different games were.
Yeah.
And then Matt, we see our favorite. I know she's mostly used as kind of the game host. I forget her official title in the student committee, but we get the appearance of Runa. She's there with Aoi and Sachiko. And I know when Aoi leaves, he'll say, "Oh, I'll send Man Yuta over." Matt, I smirked.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, Matt, Yukimi and Susura open up while Mary is out. And I love how immediately when they open the doors to the club, it immediately have a shocked look on their face and it cuts to a spider web. Matt, love me some good production, some good showing. I love that scene of the spider web just to show how really lost Yukimi and Susura are without Mary at their side, and how honestly they are kind of prey in this situation. Mary comes, finds out that their team is winning by 3 million yen, and we're introduced to Aoi. How do you say his name? Aoi or
Aoi or
yeah, Aoi.
Yeah.
I'll just say his last name, Mabuomi. Matt, I can't. Man, this is embarrassing.
Japanese names are hard.
Wow, for someone with a anime adjacent podcast, I still can't pronounce anything right. But he's part of the student council, and he bets the first game he bet 1 million, second game he bets 2 million, and then the third and final game he bets 4 million. Mary starts to panic. He admits that this was a 3-way standoff. It was a good game. But, he says red over white, white over black, black over red. Whoever chooses second will most likely win. But to Mary, she sees that, oh no, this is the martingale system. Doubling every time he loses, there is over a 90% chance of them winning once in 3 rolls. And obviously he does win. Mary fails to foresee this, does not come up with the plan. And we finally see the panic in Mary's eyes. We see that, okay, even though she is a top tier level gambler, she isn't on Yumiko's level. She's prone to failure. And Matt, I really like this scene just because, as I was saying, my biggest issue with XX was Yumiko was too strong. And here we're seeing Mary not only lose, but deal with the consequences of her loss. And Matt, this is where it ends off, where Aoi, he says, you can keep the $1 million yen. It's a gift, but in exchange, I need your help. I want you to bring down the student council president. Matt slapped my desk just because I know this is at least where I think Mary is at in XX currently, where she is on this mission to overthrow the student council president. She's in cahoots with her twin sister. But yeah, Matt, what did you think of, I guess, the ending to the episode and the falling apart of Mary's dice game?
I liked it. I thought that this was going to be the turn for where Mary starts introducing cheating into her repertoire. Because I think at the end of like every episode, or I guess anytime Mary runs into something bad, I'm always just waiting for that turn on when Mary's gonna become a villain type character.
Yeah. I I really like the ending, especially when, Susura loses, just because I think when Mary was explaining the game, she said, this is a good game because there is a chance for us to lose, but it's more likely we're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I like at the ending how there's this subversion of expectations where you think he's going to ask Mary to take out Madari, but it kind of loops into Mary's current arc, as I said in XX. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed episode 2 because it does flesh out Mary and Madari as a whole, gives them more kind of context to who they are. I think it was really nice. Honestly, I think this episode, I guess you would have to rearrange some of the Susura and Yumiki relationships, but I think this could have been inserted in XX to kind of just give more. I think this would be the episode that I'd roll my eyes if it was in XX, but I kind of would enjoy it just because it really does flesh out these characters.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as I said before, it serves as a reminder of where Mary isn't quite on Yumiko's level. And while Mary is calculating, she's currently missing something that prevents her from reaching that level, which I really liked. And I think to me, this gave the impression that, okay, Mary needs to be even more prepared, which I think in the case of Yumiko, it isn't necessarily preparation that really makes her excel at gambling. I think it's sort of what Madari kind of thinks they both have alike, where it is this kind of, I don't know, Matt, if this makes sense, but it reminds me how Yumiko has this kind of recklessness to her that's also a bit calculating, and I feel like Mary doesn't have that yet. And even in the mainline series, she doesn't have that. But yeah, I like how it ties the twin to where Mary is as a character currently. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this a lot more than I did than episode 1.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it was like a really strong episode. But yeah, Matt, any closing thoughts on episode 2?
I enjoyed episode 2. Like you said, I think 2 was a stronger episode than 1. The character introduction for Aoi is I thought was pretty good. I don't know, just a fake Street Fighter being on the screen and him losing.
Yeah,
I love to see me some knockoff products in my animes.
Just to confirm, he's not in the mainline anime, correct?
I don't think so. At first when I saw him, I thought he was one of the Batsubami relatives from season 2, but it wasn't him.
Yeah. So again, I'm also curious to see how he gets kicked out of the student council, and I think ultimately who replaces him, because I'm not actually sure if they gave him a title here. I think they just said he was from the student council.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so the student council is gonna have 3 people removed. One's gonna be from Inuda, one's gonna be for Midari.
Sachiko. Oh yeah. Well, Sachiko gets removed. I forget who ends up replacing her, but
yeah, I can't remember who else is in the student council that wasn't already in the opening shot in episode 2 for Twin.
Because I know they re-showed the shot of the student council towards the end, and then Mayunda was already there as well. But he's really a treasurer, so yeah, I think that's something that I might have to kind of look just to see where we stand. But yeah, Matt, this brings us to episode 3. A traitorous girl. Matt?
Yes.
Netflix says on the brink of becoming a house pet, Mary must find a way to earn money. Trust is on the line when she and her friends attend a coupling party. Matt? Kakegurui is back. This, I know we said episode 1 was a Kakegurui as Kakegurui episode, but Matt, it's not Kakegurui without an over-elaborate game that doesn't make sense to me.
Yep.
And honestly, of the first 3 episodes, I honestly think this was the weakest of the 3 to me. I don't know, Matt. I think the game as a whole really took me out of it, just because we're finally back at, how obnoxious they kind of are. But yeah, Matt, first impressions of episode 3, what did you think of A Traitorous Girl?
I agree that the game itself was bad, but I think that this episode, like you said, is bringing back the essence of Kakegurui. It's bringing back the super convoluted game, and I think most importantly, bringing back the gross faces and everybody kind of just being a pervert.
Okay, Matt. When I said this was the worst of the 3 episodes of Twin. I think I meant that in a way where it, for the standards that Twin introduced, this is definitely not a normal episode, but in the grand scheme of the Kakegurui universe, this was a normal episode.
Yeah.
Everyone, I really liked how, as you said, it brought back the gamble perverts, something that we've been missing. But I actually did think this episode started off strong and actually ends really strong too. But I think what takes me out is just the game itself. But
Yeah.
I did like how the episode started with Aoi saying that we shouldn't label losers house pets and discriminate against them. I want to destroy the system created by the student council president. Help me and I'll return this 1 million yen. And Matt, again, I really love the subversion from the last episode where we think that Aoi might be part of, the student council. But his declaration against the student council president is something I really like. Once again, tying back the themes of, class and discrimination. Of course, Mary is hesitant to be part of this, but, she walks around, sees that the deadline for the student council donations is coming up. The idea being pay up or you'll become a house pet. And this is when Mary goes to visit Aoi. Susura and Yukimi are there. And again, he kind of further explains why he resents the student council. He asks them, why is she so powerful? Why can't anyone defy her? Having house pets offers a way to vent frustration so your average student won't defy student council. This cements a hierarchy within the school. Students want to maintain the status quo. We need to destroy the system. And Matt, I think in terms of Kakegurui as a whole, I think for like an actual message, this really painted it on the nose. And to me, this was really kind of refreshing to really highlight. I know it's something that is explored currently was currently explored in XX to a degree, especially from Mary, who does want to destroy this house pet system. But for it to actually be spelled out in layman's terms, I really appreciated how this is the stakes that we're actually looking for. At the basis of Kakegurui as a whole, there is this disgusting pet system that characters do actively want to try to not only overcome but also tear down. So it was really nice to see it once again highlighted like this. But Matt, what did you think of the introduction to this episode?
I mean, okay, like going over Aoi's like whole speech again.
Yeah.
Like I kind of agree that it's like good to see someone in Kakegurui who has, I guess, a noble cause.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like really the way to put it, but like it also made me sad to see that because like I said, or like we were saying before, just like it being a prequel, we know he's gonna fail, and it makes me feel bad to know that someone who has, I guess, like good intentions is not going to, I guess, reach their goal.
Yeah. There's something really crushing about that. But like, as I said, this notion kind of does live on through Mary. And I think with her current scheme in XX with the student council presidents, or was it the vice president, the twin in the mask?
I don't think she was the vice president, was she?
I'm not sure, but I know Mary's currently working with her to kind of do their own thing as well. And Matt, we're brought to Aoi's gambling den. It's a place for house pets to figure out who's good at gambling. House pets can't scrap together 100K, but 10K is in their reach. If we get 10K yen from 100 students, we'll have 1 million yen. And then we have the best among them win money to play in high stakes games, then use the winners to buy everyone out of the house pet system. This is how we plan to destroy the house pet system and bring down the student council. Matt, what do you think of this plan?
I don't understand really how this plan works. I feel like they wouldn't get enough money.
Matt, you watched Alice in Borderland, right?
Yeah.
Remember the Paradise sub? I forget the Paradise the sub arc where I forget Hatter says, "Hey, if we all win and then all put our cards together, we can eventually let everyone escape the Borderland." That was giving me this vibes where when he illustrated this was his plan where, okay, we'll get all the pets to save up and eventually all the good gamblers will win big money and then we'll buy everyone out of pet status. To me, there was a flaw there just because I think this is where I started to turn on Aoi's plan, because the number one flaw to me, isn't this how you just keep pets in line the same way Hatter was keeping everyone in like the Ocean Paradise in line as well, where you have good intentions, but the logistics of, hey, everyone pulls their money together and we buy everyone out. But the notion of, at least in the context of Twin, you're a pet until your 4 years are done. But then in the context of XX, we see how even pet status can follow you outside of graduation. So I don't know. This is where I really liked how strong the episode started, just with Aoi's kind of plan and where his intentions lied. But at the same time, this kind of illustrated how kind of naive he is as well. But Matt, we finally get to the coupling game. This is the main game of the show. Matt, should I ask you to explain it? Because I don't necessarily get it myself.
I have a very loose understanding of the game.
Okay. Let's talk through it, Matt. Let's talk through it.
Yeah. So basically, I think they said 3 phases to the game. Like, one is where, first off, it's a coupling game. So it's 5 girls and 5 guys have to form a group, and then they are going to first talk to each other.
Yep. Step 1 is conversation. Yep.
Yes. And then they kind of discuss stuff among themselves.
Yep.
And then I think the third step is the girls vote on which guy they want to couple with. Yep. And then the guys themselves have I would like to couple with this girl specifically. Yep. And if those two match up, then they become a couple. The girl pays the guy, and they go through all of the girls, and then any guys who didn't get picked have to pay the group of the girls like the betted money. Does that sound correct to you?
Yeah. They both have the same buy-in price. There is a special advantage for the ladies because, as the host says, it's really hard for ladies to participate. It's called Maiden's Promise. You make a promise for a bet reduction from half to 1/10 of the usual amount. However, if you do choose to do an advantage, you have to pick something like, oh, if I want to reduce it by half, we have to exchange numbers, to, oh, we have to go to dinner. And the 1/10, the usual amount bet is, oh, we have to spend the night together. There's only one chance to confess and one chance to choose. So it's kind of this weird speed dating game. And Sachiko is overseeing the party. Makura comes up to the trio and introduces who they're going to pair up with. So in addition to, her friends, Mary, Susura, and Yukimi, they team up with the second year Kurumi and the third year Chitose. And Matt? Chitose? I'm really suspicious of her, just because throughout this whole episode, there are so many, at least as an active viewer, there were so many ways for it to go south for our girl Mary. Essentially, when Chitose was trying to explain the game, where she says that everyone should be aligned in their goal because otherwise they're all going to lose. She's the one filling out the form. She's the one handing in the form to the gamekeeper, whoever. She is the one who's boy crazed. She wants a relationship. She's the one who's played this game multiple times. And I feel like they really set up Chitose as the suspicious character. And with a title called A Treacherous Girl or Traitorous Girl, I feel like it was kind of too on the nose, but at the same time, I really liked how kind of blatant they made Chitose. What did you think of her as a character and what she meant to this game as a whole?
I think her as a character is definitely like set up with a bunch of flags, but I'm heavily I really like her character because she's bringing the pervert back into Kakegurui, and that's what I live for this anime.
I had my one note for Chitose says she has Yumiko eyes at one point.
The way that I labeled the characters, ended up labeling the characters when I went back through my notes, is Kurumi, pink, Chitose, thirsty.
Yep.
That was my
Yep.
descriptors for them.
So Matt, we finally get the group date. We're introduced to the boys. I was kind of thrown off here just because the fourth boy, Mamoru, he was so reluctant to speak where I thought, have they swapped identities? Is the twist that the girls have to confess to someone, but they turn out to be someone else? That was kind of my mindset here, just because at this point, I'm trying to figure out where the cheat comes into play and how Mary has to overcome it. And then Matt, we get to the consulting time. They find out that it's a $1 million per round buy-in.
Yep.
Mary starts to panic. This is Aoi's, he's testing her to see if she can handle this. Matt, they go into step 3, which is confession time. All the girls use their dinner together advantage. And they all agreed that to prevent as many couples as possible in order to maximize their winning, everyone needs to confess to a different guy. Confessing to the same guy only increases the chances of making a couple. Susura shouldn't accept the guy who was fawning over her. Chitose wants to confess to this one guy. So, they figure out who they're all confessing to, and then Mary pulls Susura back and saying, hey, let's switch our confessions. This is Mary's countermeasure for any potential cheats, just because she acknowledges if someone betrays the rest of the girls, everyone loses. And there's a very real possible that someone might have signaled to the guys who's confessing to who. So Mary puts her countermeasure in place. We get to the confession time. Makura, of course, is in charge of their table. Susura goes through with the swap, and then Mary realizes there's a traitor in their midst. All 5 of the girls get paired up to a guy. Mary accuses Makura of rigging. Sachiko, Matt, if there's one thing I love about, as you said, Kakegurui, Sachiko grabs Mary in such a perverse way and says, my favorite line of the first 3 episodes, don't blind yourself to your own incompetence. Matt, amazing line. We see Mary start to panic. She's convinced that everyone's in against her. She says that even if there was a traitor, there's no way everyone would couple up. The house must be cheating. And then it dawns on Mary that Susura could be the traitor and that everyone is trying to do her in. Matt, this is where the climax of the episode appears. Mary realizes that she's lost all the money that Aoi gave to her. She'll become a house pet at this rate. Kurumi comes in with such a smug face of, hey, I'll lend you all money because there's going to be a second round with a $2 million buy-in. It's only $200K each because we're all going to use the spend the night advantage. It will be much more fun this way. Mary, in a panic, she says she's tired of being deceived. She's asking who she can trust. And then that episode ends. And we finally get Crisis Mary after seeing such a calm and collected character the first 2 episodes. We finally see everything start to crash down on her. Matt, what did you think of episode 3?
Jaren, I think episode 3 brought back one of my favorite, Kakegurui bits, which is the use, or like the really good use of their episode title card. I feel like they never really hit it as hard as in episode 1 and 2, but like during Mary's freak out when she looks at Susura as she's like sort of realizing what's happening, and then it shows the treacherous girl title card.
Yeah,
Jaren, I love that.
I love that title card usage. Matt, I should really like episode 3, and as I said before, it starts off on a good high and ends off in a good high. It's just the gamble itself. I don't know. It really took me out of it, but at the same time, I feel like you need an elaborate gambling game like this to kind of set up not only where the cheat can come from, but really amplify Mary's paranoia of where it's actually coming from. Just because she doesn't know, is it the house against her? Is it her own team against her? Who is in on it? Who can she trust? Like, I love the combination of I'm sick of being deceived. Who can I trust at the end? Just because it really shows where Mary's head is at. And I'm really curious how this not only leads into episode 4, if we're going to see Mary continue to fall, or if we're going to get, Super Saiyan Mary. How is she going to claw her way out of this one? Matt, I like Mary as a character because this sort of shows where the arrogance might come from when we are introduced to her in season 1 of Kakegurui, just because we finally see her down on her luck, and then maybe this is where she gets her confidence from. I really do like how it's fitting how she says that taking risks is what separates winners from losers. But ultimately, we're seeing this vulnerability coming from Mary where if she doesn't have the game well scouted, she can't keep her composure. And for someone to say, hey, taking risks is what separates winners from losers, is Mary actually taking risks if she needs everything to be pre-calculated, if she needs a firm grasp? And again, I think this is what separates her and Yumiko ultimately, where she, under pressure, she'll crack. And I think you need to be able to keep that composure to actually handle the academy. But yeah, I'm really curious to see where episode 4 goes. And I think as of now, I'm really scared that we're just going to get, as I said before, Super Saiyan Mary. But yeah, Matt, episode 3, any other thoughts on it?
No, I think we said everything that I would have said already. Like, I thought the game itself, not great, but it's really coming back into the usual Kakegurui form.
Yeah. Overall, I'm really curious to see where it goes, but I think I'm really kind of glad that we're able to actually place doubt and paranoia towards Susura, just because, again, she is made to be this weak character, someone that Mary has to look after, but at the same time, for Susura to have this potential of betraying Mary after everything she's done for her. I know Susura says Mary's her Prince Charming. We can do anything if it's Mary leading us. Not only am I curious to see, why Susura might have cheated, but also does this set her up to be the villain for the rest of this current arc? So yeah, it really ended on a high note for me, but again, I'm really scared that we're just going to get a lot more convoluted gambling games. But yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. And Matt, I love those. Matt, I'm really bummed Netflix doesn't let you screenshot, because there were so many moments in this episode where I would have screen capped and made the show art for this episode. But overall, yep, Matt, this is a Kakegurui Ask Kakegurui episode. And Matt, with that, those were the first 3 episodes of Kakegurui Twin, 1 to 3. Next week, we're going to cover 4 to 6. Again, I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. I'm really excited to talk about anime, Matt. But again, this takes me back to 2019 when we were doing winter season. And for 20-minute episodes, it was taking me an hour and a half to watch just because I'm writing too many notes. Old habits die hard. But Matt, I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with me about our favorite compulsive gambling anime.
Yep.
I apologize in advance for the editing here because it's going to be a rough one, Matt. I talk in circles a lot.
Jaren, I'm pretty sure that after I edit this down, this episode still gonna be probably like, I don't know, hour 10, hour 15, and with that time added on to how much we talked about Kakegurui in 2019, I think that puts it at our number 1 most talked about anime.
That is Kakegurui, the anime of the mistake zone.
It has to be the anime of the mistake zone, Jaren. There's nothing. No, the only other thing it could be, I think, is Bokuben.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But Matt, I think...
Or QQ. We can just be butthurt about QQ.
I need to listen to our OVA, which closes off 2019, because I know we talked about what pound for pound the anime of the Mistake Zone was. But Matt...
Oh, I have that open. Pound for pound, the anime of the Mistake Zone was Orisuki.
Matt, Kakegurui, as we said, they always find a way to reverse the odds into their favor. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good anime. But again, Matt, I want to thank you again for joining me this week. Can't wait to talk to you about episodes 4, 5, and 6, and I hope I hope it's still able to ride that high. But as always, thank you to all our friends out there joining us. And Matt,
Yep.
take it away.
This has been the Mistake Zone, and we're not all out of Kakegurui Twin.